Perhaps you got alternatives I'm not aware of. Seems to me you have two choices. Either I drop you somewhere and you start running, or you come with me and help with something important. And of course, you could try and kill me and take the ship.
Define important.
Taking something of real value from the Empire.
I don't need you to steal.
Seeing how well you're doing on your own.
Greetings, Bucketheads! Mavar Tigar. Welcome to the 175th Andor recruiting episode of Mandovision. Nargai Tom, and thank you so much for checking out this small, independent Star Wars podcast. We're so glad you're here for our day of Andor reviews and releases. The best way to find us is, of course, on social media. We are at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. How are we doing? We're back. It's episode 4 of Andor, and there's a lot to get into. There's a lot to unpack here. This is a very dense episode of the show. Many threads we can pull on here. There's a lot to get into, a lot to talk about, but again, another really enjoyable episode of the show, and I'm really enjoying this sort of breath of fresh air, if you will, for the Star Wars franchise. You know, the show has a different look, a different feel, a different tone to it. It's visually striking. It's intricately plotted. And it's again, like I said last week, it's scratching a Star Wars itch that I've needed scratching for a long time. And this show is delivering the goods. So we go from the big action-packed, I don't know if it's a conclusion, but the opening act, you know, in episode 3, full of action as Andor and Luthen are evading the corporate security that's come to issue a warrant for Andor's arrest, and all hell breaks loose on Fennec. And there you go. The escape is made. That's the end of the episode. They take off, and where we go from here? Well, we pick up right where we left off with Luthen and Cassian. Then in the big recruitment pitch, I guess is the way we can describe it. But we're going to save all that for the other side of the bump. Let's go ahead and get into the particulars for this week's episode of Andor. It is written by Dan Gilroy, directed by Susanna White. Our plot for this week: out of options, Cassian is recruited for a dangerous mission to infiltrate an Imperial garrison. Our principal cast this week, once again, Diego Luna as Cassian Andor. Stellan Skarsgård is Luthien Rael. Denise Gall makes her appearance as Dedra Meero, the Imperial Security Bureau agent. Pretty exciting on that one. Who else we got in this episode? Genevieve O'Reilly makes her return as Mon Mothma. And just a lot going on in this episode. Wonderful supporting cast in this show as well. But we have a lot to get to. Let's go ahead and try and dive in and start pulling apart this beautiful tapestry that they're weaving together for us, so we can talk about the varied and tangled webs of deceit and deception, the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy of it all that's happening in Star Wars right now. Let's do it. Let's get going. You know what that means. It's time. Strap on your buckets. Let's go.
I fought in Mimban when I was 16. 2 years of it. Straight out of prison into the mud. I'm one of 50 that survived. And who did it turn out we were fighting? Ourselves. So please.
You were on the ground in Mimban for 6 months. You came in as a cook. You lived because you ran. But you're right about one thing. The Empire had you fighting each other, which should make you hate them all the more, and you do. I said I know you. I know the outside. I know what people tell me when I ask. The rest I imagine. I imagine your hate. I imagine that no matter what you tell me or tell yourself, you'll ultimately die fighting these bastards. So what I'm asking is this. Wouldn't you rather give it all at once to something real than carve off useless pieces till there's nothing left? I didn't risk my ass for the Starbeth unit. I came for you.
It's pretty interesting to me that we start this episode off with Cassian lying to Luthen about his time on Mimban. And again, it's great to see Mimban being referred to in some Star Wars stuff. Obviously, the old school reference of it connects it to the Alan Dean Foster novel, The Splinter of the Mind's Eye. But as we all know popularly, Mimban reincorporated into the new canon for Solo, as we know that Han was sent there as an Imperial grunt after he's kicked out of the Flight Academy. So now you have to wonder, did Andor and Han Solo's paths cross on Mimban at some point? Possibly. I guess that's something they could explore if they wanted to. I sincerely doubt they will. But it's interesting to find this out about Andor, about Cassian at this point in his life. Very much a liar, an embellisher. He sort of has spun a yarn of who he wants to present himself to be, but Luthen has the resources and the wherewithal to know it's not the truth, it's an exaggeration, and that it serves Cassian to tell these stories, but Luthen's not buying any of it. He sees through that. He sees that Cassian has been affected by the Empire, but maybe not. Luthen's trying to direct the anger that he senses from Cassian towards the Empire. That's sort of like the thing that's driving Luthen to recruit him. He sees the potential. He sees the skill set. It's all there. But right now, Cassian's anger is misdirected. It's all over the place. And it's more self-serving. It's not looking at the big picture. It's not being applied in a way that Luthen believes would be most beneficial to the cause. And that is very, very interesting stuff because, again, we're seeing an Andor who's very different from the one we meet in Rogue One. And I think at this point in his life is a lot more like the Jyn Erso when we meet her in Rogue One. So that might be part of sort of the frustration that we see in Rogue One when Cassian and Jyn first come into contact with each other. I think Cassian sees a lot of Jyn in himself, and we're seeing that in this younger Cassian now as he's sort of being applied. And sort of, recruit is the nicest way to put it. But I think most accurately, he's being directed towards the cause and being like, listen, you have a skill set, and the Empire, like you said, they're the worst. And you could be doing so much more if you let me point you in the right direction and have at it. And that's why Luthen takes him to Aldhani, and he's going to put him up with a ragtag team of rebels who are going to stage something of a heist. All right, so we're going to get a bit of a heist in possibly the next episode of the show, because this is a group of rebels who really need it. I mean, they are really there's not a lot of heroes in this group. Like, they are here to do. They want to stick it to the Empire. They want to get them off their planet, but it is the definition of ragtag, and Cassian's in there to sort of help get them to achieve this goal. It's 7 people, and Andor's there to sort of bring it home. He has the skills there. They've all said that they're a person short, and so we meet this group on Aldhani, and we find out that Aldhani has a lot in common with Kenari, as we saw in the flashbacks of Cassian's time on his home planet, and the sort of presence that the Empire brought there, the displacement of its people, the destruction of its planet with the mining accident on Kenari. And we find out that Aldhani is a similar place where they've displaced the locals, put in this garrison, put in this shipyard base, not shipyard, that's not the right word, but an Imperial shipping center, because Aldhani is right in the middle of everything, but not important enough for anybody else to pay attention to it. And in a political sense, I suppose that's why it's a great place to put an Imperial base, right? Except that they're displacing the locals. The natives are upset about that, obviously, rightly so. And so they want to rise up. And Luthen's sort of stoking that fire. And I think what we're obviously going to get into is that it's a big... This is a job to sort of fund the entire rebellion that Luthen's trying to get off the ground here. You know, the plan here on Aldhani is to rob the quarterly pay for the entire sector. And that money has to go to funding the rebellion, because when we catch up with Luthen later on in the episode, again, what's he talking to Mon Mothma about? Getting funding for the rebellion. And rebellions are not cheap. You know, you got to buy weapons. You have to buy locations and information. And there's a whole infrastructure that has to come into place if you're going to have an organized rebellion that is more than just, you know, splinter cells attacking here and there, you know, death by 1,000 paper cut kind of maneuverings. No. Like, Luthen wants to really organize something here, and that's going to cost money. And that seems to be like what they're really hammering home in this episode. And I like that we're getting into that. You know, we've spent time with the Rebel show, and, you know, a lot of stuff in some of the background material that exists for Star Wars, like whether it's the books or the comics or even some of the old video games, they sort of imply some of this stuff. They sort of dance around the issues. It's like, you know, getting a rebellion together is hard. It's not just about idealism and doing the right thing in the face of wrongness and evil and tyranny. There is a lot of logistics. There is a lot of resources that have to be gathered to make your rebellion organized, to make it be something that can sweep across the galaxy and draw people to your side, to draw talent and to draw you know, ships and armaments and everything you need to stand in the face of this giant empire that is just built to crush you, to suppress all of these things. That takes funding. And so we're, like I said, in the last week when we got into the first 3 episodes, we were seeing more of a ground level approach to everything. We're seeing it, you know, boots on the ground. And that is what this is as well. We're seeing that boots on the ground approach to getting the rebellion organized, getting the rebellion off the ground, and being able to poke the stick right in the eye of the Empire, as Luthen says. Another interesting element to this, again, you know, Luthen calling out Cassian for... and he doesn't really call him out. I shouldn't say it that way. It's not like he calls him on the spot and like, hey, you're a liar. No. He corrects him. He corrects him in a very subtle way to let Cassian know that he can't pull one over on him. That Luthen's done his homework on Cassian Andor. Cassian Andor! I was complimented on my Stellan Skarsgård impression earlier in the week, so I wanted to drop it out there again. I didn't do it as well this time. I could tell. I got a little caught in my throat. But maybe I'll try it again one more time before the show's out. But it's, again, interesting that Luthen calls him out. Again, I said it again. Interesting that Luthen puts him on the spot, lets him know that he knows he's lying. Because there's a lot of... This episode shows a lot of duplicity, right? Luthen being duplicitous. You know, we get to see his other life in this episode. We get to see him as this haughty-taughty, high-end shopkeeper on Coruscant. We get to see the duplicity that Mon Mothma has to live with in her life as this Imperial senator who is trying her best to use subterfuge and hide the fact that she's trying to funnel money to Luthen to fund a rebellion, to stand in the face of the Empire. But, you know, lying is clearly something that's not easy for Mon Mothma. The deception that's involved, knowing that people are watching her every day. There's new drivers, new security people. There's no one she can trust in her circle now. You know, every time she goes to the bank to withdraw credits, to move money around, it's new tellers. She feels completely cornered. And as she tells Luthen in his shop, there's you know, she is more at risk than anyone, because at this point she is the face, and a very public face about this. You know, we all know that Bail Organa is also involved, but he may be shuttling back and forth to Alderaan. You know, she is in Coruscant. She is in the Lion's Den, and if all eyes are on her, because they suspect that she may be doing something nefarious to undermine the Empire, then of course, yeah, she's at risk. One of the elements to that part of the storyline that I really enjoyed was as we return to Coruscant, and Luthen goes into the back of his ship to like almost like a secret area of his ship where he keeps his disguise for his Coruscant personality, for that persona that he assumes when he's on Coruscant. You know, putting on the wig, the high-end clothing, and I love the way he takes like that moment to sort of get his affectations kind of back in place as he goes, again, putting himself in the lion's den, and putting himself in a position to be compromised and to be captured and caught if he were to be found out. So I love that he sort of pauses and to sort of remind himself, he's like, okay, I'm not out in space now. I'm not doing rebel things right now. I have to get back into this role. I have to assume this character that I wear when I am on Coruscant, and I cannot falter in it. So again, that little pause for that affectation, loved it so much. Visiting Luthen's shop was a lot of fun too, kind of getting to see the life that he has on Coruscant and how he's trying to use that shop as a front for the rebellion.
If you can't deliver, I need to know.
Do you think I'm not trying?
I never think that. But I need to start planning if you're no longer coming through for us.
The money's there. It's just getting very dangerous to move it around. I can't pull funds the way I used to. They're watching me now.
They're watching everyone.
This is different. They're everywhere. There's a new spy every day at the Senate. I visit the bank. They're all new faces.
You got a new driver.
I feel under siege.
I have many mouths to feed. I can only forage for so long.
So this leads us to Mon Mothma discussing bringing in another member into the inner circle. And Luthen has some concerns about that, but you have to be wondering, who is Mon Mothma talking about at this point? And hopefully we'll get some answers to that very, very soon. I'm very intrigued. Again, we're full of possibilities, but I don't want to play that speculation game. Let's just focus on the show. And talk a little bit more about Luthen's store. I gotta talk about Luthen's store a little bit. And Luthen's shop is also very, very interesting. It's sort of even like passive resistance in a sense, because if you think about sort of what we know about the Empire, and again, we extrapolate a lot of our knowledge, quote unquote, of the Empire. It's not all of it's a lot of it's from like old canon, old lore, sort of what we've taken from certain elements of the movies and some of the other shows, what's been alluded to. That's why I sort of think it's interesting here that Luthen has this shop of historical curios, and again, based off of sort of extrapolating what we know about the Empire, they're sort of not real big on the preservation of history. They're sort of into suppressing history, kind of forgetting about it, wiping it out. The belief being that Emperor Palpatine goes to great lengths to make the galaxy forget about the Jedi. He destroys their temples. He takes their artifacts. He crushes everything he can, squirrels it all away. It's not for any knowledge of the Jedi is knowledge for him and him alone. So again, you sort of extrapolate that history is written by the conquerors, right? And the Empire is the conquerors of the galaxy. So why not try and suppress any sort of history of the rest of the galaxy that takes place before the rise of the Empire? That stuff's not important. That doesn't matter. So Luthen's store sort of exists as like this passive resistance to the fact that the Empire wants to write their own history, and that's what the more important element to them. So there's a lot of, and again, it's sort of funny to me. Again, last week I made the reference. I made a declarative statement that, oh man, this Andor show is pretty great. Like, there's not a ton of Easter eggs or anything that I got to worry about, paying attention to in the background. Like, the show's just happening. So of course we go to Luthen's shop, and it's full of all sorts of visual Easter eggs. We have a bit of an Easter egg hunt going on in Luthen's shop. And the first most noticeable item behind Luthen in his shop is what appears to be a Sith Stalker armor. And, you may know this from the Force Unleashed video games. Starkiller dons it in several of the Dark Visions. And another character, I believe, takes it over by the end of that game. I'm trying to remember his name. It was like Merrick something, I think, right? Reagan will know. Galen Merrick. Sorry, just clicked. All right, there it is. So, if you played the old Force Unleashed video game, a lot of fun throwing stormtroopers 1,000 miles away with the Force. Great times. So that armor, very reminiscent of what we see in Luthen's shop here. There's all kinds of other things. We could talk about the Utapawan monk cudgel. That's okay. It looks like there might be Plo Koon's breathing mask, maybe. I'm not so sure. There's look what appears to be the mural of the world between worlds. That could be a thing. That could be a real thing right there. People have speculated that over his shoulder in the back room, when he's talking to Mon Mothma, that there are two Jedi and Sith holocrons visible. They looked a little big to me, but I guess there's not really any sort of size limit on how big or small a Jedi or Sith holocron has to be, so I guess they could be. Like, why not? Let's go for it. Let's just believe that that's the case. And then one element that I saw in Luthen's back room that I thought was very, very interesting, if I'm right, I did freeze it because I sort of did like a double take, and I was like, wait, is that what I think it is? What appeared to be Indiana Jones's whip, frozen in carbonite. That's fairly interesting stuff. So, yeah, Luthen's got like this whole historical thing going on, and we didn't even mention the Kuwati sigil that he gives to Andor at the beginning of the episode. Another really great piece of referencing some old lore, I guess is the best way to describe it, right? Because not only, he drops the name Kuwati, right? So we know he's referring to the planet Kuwat, who we have not really seen in new canon, but in the old canon was a major Imperial shipyard and was a big deal planet. It's also a core planet, so it's important to the Empire. What's also really neat about it is what he says about it, right? So it's made of the blue kyber. He describes it as a sky stone from the ancient planet. And he says, and I quote, "It celebrates the uprising against the Rakatan invaders," end quote. This, my friends, is a reference to the classic Knights of the Old Republic video game series. And it's about Force-sensitive invaders who could only be stopped when they encountered the early Jedi. And again, if you want to explore that, you can check out the Dawn of the Jedi comic books. I posted some pictures several months back when I was revisiting that series recently. And it's all about the early Jedi encountering the Rakatan and stopping their invasion of the galaxy on the planet Tython, a planet that we visited on The Mandalorian. So pretty neat stuff in that regards. Now we're going to transition and talk about Mon Mothma here because Mon Mothma is fascinating. I'm really excited that we're getting to explore her in a more direct way, as opposed to like comics and novels that sort of have existed to kind of fill in some of her backstory. I like her being a front and center character in this show. One of the things I was sort of surprised by was when we go home and when we return to Mon Mothma's home. And again, I sort of love she lives in this palatial sort of estate. That seems fitting for a senator of her rank, I would imagine. But I sort of love the way that like the Chandrillan trees are incorporated into his design. And Chandrila referenced very heavily in the episode. So I sort of like all these things about it. But what's interesting to me is she finds out that her husband's planning this dinner party. And, this is our first time in a visual form meeting Perrin, her Mon Mothma's husband, and they seem to have a very antagonistic relationship. I mean, he seems to have gone out of his way to invite her political enemies to this party because they're not boring. He's looking for some sort of spice of life, if you will, here on Coruscant, living as I don't know if he's a kept man necessarily, but he seems to have some sort of itch for excitement. When Mon's in Luthen's shop, they talk about how he sort of has like this appreciation for the history of violence. So you sort of wonder what Perrin's deal is here a little bit. And Chandrila is in the books at least, very peaceful planet. But yeah, I want to know more about Mon Mothma's relationship with her husband. Is it antagonistic intentionally so? Or is there something going on? Was there some sort of rift that will be healed or possibly torn asunder by the end of the series. I know in the books they have talked about her being married, but they can change whatever they want. The sort of long-standing rule with Star Wars is if it's on a show or if it's been filmed and it's on a show or a movie, that takes precedence over anything from a book or a comic, and that's just kind of the way it is. Also, with that situation is, again, we talked about the political enemies involved, and it's Sly Moore and Ars Dangor, who, again, if you've read the comics, you've gotten to spend some more time with these characters, particularly in the Darth Vader comic book. But we also get reference to Gorman and how Sly Moore and Ars Dangor have cut off them have cut off Gorman's trade routes, and that's a fairly deep cut reference because Gorman is a planet that's going to have an atrocity committed against it by the Empire, and it seems like they're building towards that atrocity being committed. The first step's cutting off these trade routes so that when the populace rises because they're starving to death, the Empire's going to go and quell it with maximum violence, according to the lore. According to again, it's been referenced in Star Wars Rebels, but you can go back to the old canon, old EU, the Star Wars X-Wing video game and the Rebellion video game. Also talks about Gorman being a place of a major Imperial atrocity, and we seem to be building towards that with this reference. And that's got to be an awkward dinner. Like, I don't like to go to dinner with anybody that I'm not a fan of. I mean, listen, it doesn't take a lot for you to be somebody that I'm just like, I don't want to spend time with that person at all. But can you imagine being there with your enemy, like a political adversary, if you will, and having to like play nice while these people are in your home, drinking your food and going through your medicine cabinet when you're not looking? Oh, I would be very, very upset by this. I understand Mon Mothma's pain on this, and I think Mon needs to go into her bedroom, put on the Netflix, get some DoorDash or whatever, and just not leave. I would just skip this dinner party. I would not participate at all. I would say, I am super sick. I'm just going to hide out in here. Not going. No thanks. Hard pass. Hard no.
Ars Dangor, Sly Moore from the Vizier's private chamber?
Is that a problem?
You can't be serious. These people hate me. They spend every day trying to undo anything I've touched.
Well, perhaps tomorrow they'll think twice.
Not right now, please. Go. You shouldn't have invited them without making sure I was aware.
Well, it's a bit late to cancel. But at your pleasure.
Well played, Perrin. And no, I'm not being serious. Don't seat them near me.
Oh, I've taken care of that. You're at the boring end of the table. These people are fun.
Oh, are they? Are they fun? Oh, we should find some Gorman guests for tonight and see how amused they are. Your fun friends just cut off their shipping lanes yesterday. Do you know how many will starve? Perhaps we can laugh about it over the third course.
Perhaps you should have a rest.
If you make me pay attention, I will, and you won't be happy.
Before we leave this particular topic, though, I did want to go back to Mon Mothma and Perrin real quick, because I am very curious about the relationship. I'm curious if there was a love there, or if this is sort of like an arranged political kind of marriage, which is why Perrin's more than happy to kind of poke the bear with Mon Mothma. I'd love to explore this a little bit more. I want to get some more information here because I'm very curious. Mon Mothma's doing very dangerous things, aiding Luthen in his quest to kind of get this rebellion building and off the ground. So you have to wonder, how much does he know? It seems that he doesn't know anything. It seems that he's in the dark. And perhaps that's why he's lashing out, because he knows that she's keeping secrets. Does he suspect that it is a secret this big? Probably not. But I think he suspects that Mon Mothma's up to something. His wife is up to something, and maybe it's something as simple as he believes that she is stepping out on him. So that's why he's doing these things. I'm looking forward to exploring more of the dynamic of their relationship and kind of getting into Mon's life. I mean, again, we're spending time with an Imperial senator at the height of the Empire, coalescing its power around her. And she feels like she has no allies, and she goes home and finds out she has no allies there either. It's got to be an insanely frustrating and disheartening position to find yourself in. You're trying to do the right thing. You're trying to stand up for the good. You're trying to be light in the face of darkness in the galaxy. And you feel the enemy on all sides of you when you're out and about, when you're in the Imperial Senate, when you're out on the streets, when you're in the bank. You feel the eyes on you. And you want to believe that when you go into the confines of your home, that you're possibly safe. Maybe you're worried about your servants because, again, they live in the high life. They got the servants going on, so you can't really know where the servants' alliances lie. But you want to believe that at some point you would be able to confide in your partner, and it doesn't feel like that's the relationship that Mon and Perrin have with each other. So I want to see that explored more. I can't wait to have that explored more. And gosh, I just wanted those answers. I want to know. I want to know so badly about what that. The final element of this episode that I want to bring up is now the introduction of the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau. Again, old-time fans like myself will remember the ISB that existed specifically in the X-Wing Squadron books. I'm sorry, the Rogue Squadron books. My goodness, and generally with led by Isard, and they were sort of like in those books. They were kind of very SS-like in a sense. They seemed a bit softened from that in this take of the ISB, but I suspect we're going to see them ramping things up. The ISB portion of this episode is actually kind of fun because it's dealing with a lot of the fallout from episode 3 of the series. We come into this meeting and we find out about the fallout on Ferrix and how things got out of hand, and now there's going to be a price to pay, and that price is paid by Cyril Karn and his boss and his subordinate who launched that attack on Ferrix, and it all went horribly, horribly wrong. They're all dismissed. The Morlana is now being taken under control by direct Imperial supervision. The corporate police thing, Corsac is not Corsac, the Moral. I did that last time too. The pre-core, I think is what they were called in the last episode. They're out. They're done. And this guy Karn is tossed out on his butt, goes home to his mom, and they seem to have an interesting relationship. But I would be surprised if this is not the last time we've seen Karn in this show, specifically because ISB agent Deidre Mero has taken a great interest in what happened on Ferrix, because she is the one in the sort of supervisor of the sector where Cassian stole the Starpath unit from. She's aware of the Starpath unit's theft and that it was recovered on Ferrix, so she wants the details, but she's not getting the information from her fellow ISB agent who's now in charge of that sector. What's interesting about this, from the conversation that we have with Mero and the person playing her boss, what was his name? I'm blanking on it already. I'm not even sure they introduced him as a character with a name, but I'm sure he has a name. I just don't know what it is yet. But the ISB officer in charge, which if it was a Sard, would be amazing. I would lose my mind. So if there's a correction anytime soon, I'll get back to you on that. But what I really liked about the conversation after the other ISB agent has left the room, the one in charge of the FedEx sector, is that it's very much implied that Mero is going to have a hard time because she is a female in the Empire, and that the deck is a bit stacked against her, so she has to work harder and be more diligent than her other agents around her. I thought that was very, very interesting. On a personal note, one of the things I've disliked about the Empire in sort of like the new Disney-fied version of it, and this has been mostly in the comics, where they try to do this in the comics. I haven't seen it too much in the new books or any of the shows or anything like that. But this sort of idea that the Empire is not like a human first kind of organization. The comics has been incorporating aliens into the Empire. And I don't know, call me old fashioned, but I liked my Empire just being full of space racists. I just thought it was easier that way. And, just a very anti-alien stance that the Empire had. It sort of made sense for them as tyrants, right? As fascists. So why not have a little bit of sexism in there too, That sounded weird the way when you say it like that. But again, I think we're going to spend time with this ISB agent, and we're going to I would not be surprised if at some point we sort of sympathize with her and the things that get stacked against her on her path to finding the Starpath unit. And again, she tells her supervisor she's seen a pattern. She is seeing the beginning, the fomentation of rebellion, and she's here to squash it. But if she's not going to get the support of her fellow agents and her supervisor, again, she's going to have to go to great lengths to prove that these things exist.
You have 2 sectors to supervise. Levin is handling 6. He does, I will admit, hew to the traditional viewpoint of this office and its staffing. He is, I'm sure, a challenge to work with. His quarterly reports, however, are in, and yours are not, and here we are spending your valuable time with this issue. There's a high bar for your performance, Lieutenant. Unfair, perhaps, but senseless to ignore and potentially the foundation of a uniquely superior career. You're supposed to be more competent and tucked away. That's why you're here. That's why we're bringing in officers like you. Let's remind everyone of that and not get lost in the dust.
Yes, sir.
On a positive note, I was impressed with your detention numbers from Sev Tok, far above the quota. I may be sending more of that sort of work your way.
Thank you, sir.
We're done.
And I'm really interested to see what her journey is, what her path is going to be. ISB agent Miro could be a very interesting character to follow on the show. And again, I'm really intrigued by it. And again, I call back because the fallout from episode 3, when all the private security guys are getting disciplined and chewed out and sent out on the way on their bums is pretty darn amusing. The one last little note I had, I skipped over it earlier, but I actually liked how when Cassian gets to Aldhani and he's getting ready to be introduced to the ragtag group of rebels, would-be rebels, he takes the name Clem, which is, in case anyone missed it, is the name of his sort of adopted father, the one who was referred to as being hung in the town square, basically. So kind of a neat little callback to that, and a very, if you missed it last week, yes, Clem was the name of of Cassian's adopted father. So a very cool little callback right there in that episode. By the way, I did just do some deep diving, and it's Major Partagaz, not Isard, in charge of the ISB, at least not on this level that we're seeing thus far. But maybe Isard shows up later. Who's to say? I want to go back real quick to the planet Aldhani and Cassian kind of making his way with Vel's group. I never gave Vel credit I never named her, but I did like the way they sort of lay their plan out for him, and he calls it sort of a suicide run, which we know Cassian's fate is ultimately to have a suicide run, but we know it's not going to be this one. So I did really enjoy that element of the episode. I loved him trying to sort of integrate with these people, and now and it ends with him having to learn a whole lot of things before they're going to move forward with the plan, because they're 3 days out from pulling this thing off, and Cassian's going to have to step up and deliver the goods.
Know how to use this?
Yeah.
That's the Rono freighter specs and the console layout. You get done with that? That's a detailed map of the garrison. That's an Aldhani phrase book.
Can I eat my food?
You'll eat, you'll let Cinta check the bandage, and you'll have learned all that by morning.
It's really good stuff. I liked the plot here, what they're getting to with the heist, and this group that Vel is the leader of on Aldhani. It's really interesting stuff. And again, I don't think they trust Cassian, and maybe rightly so. And it's sort of interesting that he's portrayed as a mercenary, right? That Luthen sort of, promised him 20,000 credits, which again, if they're stealing this entire payroll, is that's a lot of money. That's a lot of Imperial credits to offer somebody. So Cassian is sort of a mercenary, at least as he's portrayed as one, because he's not a true believer yet. He's not the Cassian Andor from Rogue One. But you have to wonder if by the end of this heist, if it goes successfully, just when does he achieve true believer status? When does he say, no, this money's for the cause and I'm all in? And so that's what I'm looking forward to seeing. And, maybe it's next episode. Let's hope so. I want to see some goods. Because again, as good as this episode is, give me some of that Star Wars action too, because I'm a big fan of all of it. So yeah, this is a really great episode of the show. Again, I think we're off to a really strong start with this series. We're 4 episodes in. I'm having a total blast watching it. So many levels, so many layers. It's complex. It's thoughtful. It pays attention to its own history. It hasn't steamrolled anything out of Star Wars continuity just yet, which I appreciate. And it's showing Cassian Andor to be a far more complex character than I think maybe he was given credit for in Rogue One. I love seeing him on these first steps. I love seeing him on this journey from being something of a scoundrel, of something of a con man, and a thief, to the true believer in the rebellion. And again, sort of exploring those lines that he first gave us in Rogue One about him being in this fight. Maybe he was in this fight, but in a very different fashion than I think we all imagined him being in this fight since he was 6 years old. So I like getting to see that story. But I'm having a great time exploring Luthien Rail. I'm having a great time seeing Mon Mothma's world and sort of like the walls closing in around her, feeling that she has. I want to see what the ISB has in store for us. I'm intrigued by that storyline. There's a lot going on here. I'm in for all of it. I think you all knew that already. In for a penny, in for a pound, and I'm loving it. Andor has been a real treat thus far. And I'm so happy. Again, I'm getting that itch scratched that, it was right between the shoulder blades. And it feels so good. Oh, yes, give me more of this kind of Star Wars. I'm having a blast. With that being said, I think we're going to wrap up this episode of the show. I think I got everything off my chest that I needed to. I didn't cover every single Easter egg. There's a Scarif reference in there. There's a reference to the planet adjacent to the planet where the Mandalorian Din Djarin finds Grogu. These are interesting things, but they weren't dropping my socks or anything like that. They were cool. I liked seeing them. I liked hearing them. But yeah, I covered the big ones. I covered the ones that I thought struck a real resonant chord with me. So I hope you agree with my take on that. All right, so let's go ahead and close up shop. Another reminder to please follow us on social media. We are at Mando_Vision on Twitter and Instagram. Please email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and follow. Please be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share this show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. If possible or so inclined, please give us a sweet 5-star reviews. They really help small independent shows like us stand out, not get lost in the shuffle, and we appreciate you taking the time to do so. If you got a few shekels that you want to help support the show with, you can do so over at Mando. Ooh, hang on now. Head over to patreon.com/Mandovision. You can become a Mandovision maniac, join Buckethead Nation, and hang out with super cool people and get bonus content. Sweet bonus content. New bonus content just dropped for our Patreons yesterday. Hang out with rad Patreons like the Aspinall Chody, the Batman Abejo, Jeff Nail. Jeff's got a great podcast called The Ring in Ear. Check that one out. Thanks to Evil Circle, the evilest of all circles, the Squid Master General Brian Broussard, the New Jersey Devil Mark Wagamer, our very own Joker and Harley Quinn Brian and Krista of Pariah Brewing in Baltimore, Maryland. The Beer Hop Brigadier General Jesus Beer Hops, the silent assassin, he who shall not be named, and Syndicate Ram, co-host of Come On, It's Still Good, a great movie and TV show podcast, and a frequent collaborator with us here on the Mandovision podcast. Thank you all so much for the support. Enjoy the new episode. More bonus content coming throughout the month of October. Brace yourselves if you are in a part of Buckethead Nation. Get ready. All right, we'll be back next week for another thrilling installment of Andor. I can't wait. Oh, is it Wednesday yet? Get me there. All right, Bucketheads, let's get out of here. You know this podcast can only end one way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
I find that answer vague and unconvincing.